Why does the United States have a capital city that isn't in any state? Why build it in the middle of swamps and forests, instead of a thriving city like New York or Philadelphia? And how did this unfinished town, once burned to the ground by foreign soldiers, rise to become the most powerful political city on Earth? Today, we're diving into the untold story of Washington, D.C., before it was created, during its chaotic birth, and after, as it was shaped by wars, monuments, and constant political battles. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed in Philadelphia. But Philadelphia wasn't automatically guaranteed to be America's permanent seat of government. The revolution was raging, states were divided, and there was no central capital yet. Congress met wherever it could, from Baltimore to Princeton, from Trenton to New York. Imagine the government constantly on the move, like a wandering caravan. Then came the breaking point, the Philadelphia Mutiny of 1783. Soldiers from the Continental Army, angry over unpaid wages, surrounded Congress. The Pennsylvania government refused to protect the delegates. Can you imagine? America's lawmakers are the leaders of a brand new nation fleeing for their lives from their own soldiers. This shocking event convinced leaders, the United States needed a neutral, independent capital, not beholden to any state militia. By 1787, the U.S. Constitution was written. Buried in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, Congress was granted the power to create a federal district, up to 10 miles square. But where would it go? This question sparked a fierce rivalry. Northerners wanted it in an established hub like Philadelphia or New York. Southerners wanted it closer to their plantations and commerce routes. The solution came in 1790, at a private dinner hosted by Thomas Jefferson. There, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and Jefferson himself struck the famous dinner table bargain. Hamilton got his financial plan from the federal government assuming state debts, while Southerners got the capital placed along the Potomac River, in territory favorable to Virginia and Maryland. How do you turn swamps, farmland, and a riverbank into a majestic capital city worthy of a new republic? In 1791, President George Washington personally chose the site for the new federal district straddling the Potomac River, between Maryland and Virginia. This land was ceded by the two states and became a 100-square-mile diamond-shaped district. Now the question, who would design this city of the future? Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, a French-born engineer and Revolutionary War veteran. L'Enfant imagined a grand city of wide avenues, ceremonial spaces, and symbolic architecture that would rival Europe's capitals. But here's the drama: L'Enfant's arrogance clashed with landowners and government officials. He destroyed property that interfered with his design, refused to compromise, and eventually was fired. His assistant, Andrew Ellicott, revised the plan and carried it forward. In 1793, George Washington laid the cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol. Construction began on the White House soon after. But the conditions were harsh: workers battled mud, disease, and heat. Much of the labor came from enslaved African Americans, alongside European immigrants and free black workers. The foundation of the Capitol was literally built on inequality. By 1800, the government officially moved from Philadelphia to Washington. John Adams moved into the unfinished White House. It was drafty, surrounded by muddy streets, and some members of Congress called it a miserable swamp. His wife, Abigail Adams, even hung laundry in the East Room. The early years were filled with struggle. The city was underdeveloped, money was scarce, and foreign diplomats mocked America's shabby capital. If Washington already seemed doomed, what would happen when a foreign army set fire to it? The city's greatest trial came in 1814, during the War of 1812. British troops marched into Washington, D.C., and set fire to the Capitol, the White House, and other government buildings. President James Madison fled, and First Lady Dolly Madison famously saved a portrait of George Washington before escaping. The young Capitol was left in ashes. But Washington rebuilt. The White House was restored, the Capitol expanded, and slowly, the city began to match its symbolic importance. In 1846, the portion of the district donated by Virginia including Alexandria was retroceded, returned to Virginia. That's why D.C. today only sits on former Maryland land. Then came the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. Washington became a fortress city. Union troops camped all around, hospitals filled the streets, and President Abraham Lincoln directed the war effort just blocks from the Capitol. By war's end, Washington had grown into a true hub of power. Over the decades, monumental construction transformed the skyline. The Washington Monument rose in 1884. The Lincoln Memorial was dedicated in 1922, followed by the Jefferson Memorial in 1943. These weren't just monuments, they turned the city itself into a living symbol of American democracy. But political battles never stopped. For most of its history, Washingtonians had no elected local government and no voting representation in Congress. Not until 1973 did the Home Rule Act allow residents to elect their own mayor and council. Even today, the fight for D.C. statehood continues. And yet Washington, D.C. has grown into the heart of world power. From the White House to the Pentagon, from protests on the National Mall to international summits, this once swampy experiment has become the stage where history unfolds daily. So the next time you see the Capitol dome on the news, remember, it wasn't inevitable. Washington, D.C. exists because of compromise, conflict, fire, and resilience. From muddy fields to a global capital, its story is America's story. Now, here's the big question: should Washington, D.C. finally become America's 51st state? Or does its unique role mean it should remain a federal district forever? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this short dive into history, hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories that shape the world we live in today.